If you're hoping to pass the SIE and Series 7 exams to kickstart your career in finance, well, then you're in the right place. We are going to walk through the ultimate test prep guide for each of those exams so that you can approach them with confidence. Whether you're just getting started with your studies for the SIE exam, or if you're fine-tuning your study plan, this video has you covered. So grab a pen if you might want to take some notes, but hit the like button on this video, sit back, and let's get into it. First, let's break down the basics of these two exams for anyone who might be new to them. The SIE, or Securities Industry Essentials exam, is the entry-level test for the securities industry. It has 75 multiple choice questions. You have an hour and 45 minutes to take the test, and you need to score at least 70% in order to pass it. It covers a lot of the basics like capital markets, products, regulations, things that you need to know if you're just getting started in the finance field. But maybe most importantly, and the whole reason that the SIE even exists today as a standalone test, is that you do not need to be sponsored by a FINRA firm, that is a financial company, in order to register and take the SIE exam. Anyone out there in the world can sign up and sit for and pass the SIE test. So you used to always have to be already working at a FINRA sponsored firm to even sign up for the exam, but now with the SIE, you can do it on your own. The Series 7 is now the next step in the licensing process. It's generally considered to be a little bit tougher. It's certainly a little bit longer. It has 125 multiple choice questions. You have 3 hours and 45 minutes to take that test, and you need to score at least 72% on it to pass. It dives a little bit deeper into certain topics like investment products and making recommendations to clients. The good news about both of these is that the SIE is the prerequisite to the Series 7, and so there's a lot of overlap between the two tests. So you're not gonna feel like you're just spinning your wheels in either case. The SIE, at least you'll know that you're starting to build the foundation you'll need for the 7, and once you get to the 7, maybe half of the material is gonna feel like review. So that overlap can be helpful in your studies. Let's dive into the specific prep plan that I think you should follow. This is very similar to what I did almost 10 years ago when I passed the Series 7 exam on my first attempt. To ace both of the tests, I recommend a 12-week study plan. Now, you can play with that schedule, but this is a really good guideline just to start out with and maybe even follow directly. Here's the general breakdown of that. For the first 4 weeks, between 1 through 4, you're gonna be focused in on the SIE content. I recommend using study materials. I get this question all the time. Hey, AJ, what test prep provider did you use for the SIE or the Series 7? The answer is I used Past Perfect by a company called Kier. I don't know if Kier is still publishing Past Perfect for what is now the SIE exam and the Series 7 exam, but just Google the popular 3 test prep providers out there. All of them will do. There's no rocket science on the SIE or the Series 7, and each of the popular test prep providers has the information down pat. They will teach it in a helpful way, consolidate all the important points for you, and I think any of them would be a useful tool. In terms of how you tackle your studies every single day, I recommend studying 2 or 3 hours, and I recommend being very consistent with that, either studying 6 or 7 days a week. And literally, if you're studying 7 days a week, I am saying go 12 weeks with 0 days off. Reason being, it's just gonna be that much easier for your brain to stay in the mode of Series 7 material, and you, I think, are just gonna drastically increase your likelihood of passing the exam. Each day when you sit down to start studying, it's not that tricky. You could simply pick up right where you left off yesterday, either in your test prep provider's video lessons or their study notes. I do recommend doing practice problems throughout the days, each time any potential practice problems come up in your study material. And then certainly at the end of each either chapter or section, let's say whatever it takes you maybe 2 or 3 days to cover, there should be little quizzes along the way. Call them 10 to 20 question quizzes. And pausing to take those quizzes is also very beneficial. It's going to make sure that you understand what material that you've studied over the last 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 days is really ingrained in your mind, or you've really learned, and which material you need to practice on a little bit more. So taking those quizzes throughout your study material along the way is super important. If you've watched my channel before, you've heard me talk about the specific approach that I recommend to taking practice questions, or how to utilize them in your studies for any exam. But if you get a question right on a quiz, move on. You don't need to review it again until the last maybe a week or 2 before your test. But any questions you get wrong, you do need to go back to the material, review the information that informs the question that you answered incorrectly. Maybe understand why you answered the question incorrectly, then go back to that question, reread it, re-answer it, and then that comparing of your new understanding against what you thought was the right answer when you incorrectly answered the question, that comparison in your brain is very, very beneficial in cementing knowledge and really learning a concept. By week 4, you probably want to take a diagnostic test, reviews all of the information you've studied related to the SIE, and you're going to keep taking those tests until you're scoring between a 75 to an 80%, just so that you can be confident. Personally, I would do it until I get an 80% on a diagnostic test that covers all the chapters of the SIE. And that is, again, just to give yourself that extra degree of confidence that you really have the information down pat before you would ever actually go in to sit down and take your real test. And if you're at all worried about that timeline, I want to say out loud that it is very realistic to be able to learn all the content for the SIE in 4 to 6 weeks if, and this is a big if you're consistent with your studies, if you study every day, if you spend the right amount of time each day studying this stuff, and you're practicing along the way. Even if you're new to the industry, again, because it's not rocket science on these tests, there is a lot of concepts that you will have never heard of. And even for myself now, I've been a financial advisor for 8 years. There's plenty of stuff on those exams that I wouldn't be able to answer correctly, but that's why the consistency with studying is so important, so that it's literally kind of all fresh in your mind when you're doing this diagnostic test and when you go to do the real thing. So then hopefully you can sign up for and take and pass your SIE exam, and then we're gonna block the next 4 weeks to reviewing the material for the next step, which is the Series 7. The only difference that I think you're gonna wanna implement in your Series 7 studies compared to your SIE studies, and if you've gotten to this point, you've already passed the SIE exam, is actually you just need to do more practice questions, more of the things that I was just talking about as it relates to the SIE. And the reason is, there's just a larger quantity of concepts and certainly like terms that you need to know on the Series 7 compared to the SIE. Point of doing practice questions is just to find the areas in which you've learned the information and in which areas you haven't yet learned the information. And you won't get a good idea about all of the concepts that you haven't learned yet unless you try practice questions on all those concepts. And since there are more concepts, you just have to do more practice questions when you're studying for the Series 7 in order to figure out which areas you haven't got down pat yet. There are a bunch of strategies. As a side tip, I wouldn't give this tip, but there are other strategies, certainly other YouTube videos talking about study for 30 minutes, walk around for 3. For me, that stuff, either I kind of do that naturally or I just don't find it to be all that beneficial. Partly because you might end up just finding yourself looking forward to those little 3-minute breaks too often. Plus, if you consider 12 weeks of studying and 10% of your time is spent on a break, that's a lot of hours. That's a lot of potential practice questions that you otherwise could have gotten done had you not scheduled in a break every 30 minutes. So you'll just have to figure out what works best for you. Maybe you already know if you've been through college or university, if you really need breaks while studying or if you don't. But if you can go without making a scheduled break every 20-30 minutes during your study plan, I would personally write off that advice that you may have heard in other YouTube videos, because it's just a little bit less efficient in my view. Now, after you've done all the practice questions, done all the review, for the Series 7, I don't think it's as realistic to just sign up for the test after as little as 4 weeks to take it. I think you need to now allocate 2 to 3, maybe 4 more weeks just for practice tests and review. And it's for the same reason that I mentioned you should be doing more practice questions throughout your pass of the material. And that is that there's just more content. It's just gonna take more time, energy, effort, and literally more practice to make sure you've covered all the topics that you need to have covered to build that level of confidence. I think it will literally just take more practice tests in order to hit that same 80% threshold that I recommended you try to hit with one of your practice tests before you sign up for the real thing. So the point here is just be prepared to allocate a few more weeks at least to simply doing practice exams, and then of course, importantly, reviewing all the concepts from the Series 7 material on any questions that you answer incorrectly during those practice exams. That iterative process of rereading concepts, realizing what about that information you thought was different from how you answered the question, retaking the question, and then ultimately comparing the differences in the answers. It can take time because, again, there's more material. Just be aware that this one will not be quite as quick to pass through. So let's say you've gone through all that, you've scored 1 or 2 80% practice tests, and now you've signed up for your real exam. It's not that important, in my opinion, to spend time memorizing terms or formulas, largely because you'll get a formula sheet and a term sheet that you can use live on your screen while you're taking the Series 7 exam, and partly because if you've done as many practice questions as the methodology that I just laid out would imply you've done, then you're gonna have a lot of these concepts down anyway. So it would be sort of extra time to just be memorizing terms and formulas. So after doing those practice exams, I think the last thing you need to do is just start to relax a little bit and understand that you should be confident in the preparation that you've done. Now you can certainly still review things, do more practice questions leading up to your test. However, I would specifically and strongly recommend that the 24 hours leading up to your real exam, you do nothing. Or really, I want to say the one day prior. So let's say you're taking your exam on a Thursday. Starting Wednesday morning, you do no studying at all. And if you can, take the day off of work and just let your body and mind really rest. Do something you enjoy. Maybe bowl, maybe go see a movie, get some chores done around the house, things that you feel generally productive doing. Certainly don't lay on the couch and watch Netflix for 12 hours. If you did take the day off work, I don't think that's beneficial to anything in life. Certainly not your mental sharpness or mental health, but just do things the day before. If it is going to work, try to have a relatively slower day, and then that evening, relax, do something you enjoy, get things done. I think doing all this can provide a lot more mental clarity, and mental clarity is important because exam day, if your brain's working 8% more efficiently than it otherwise may have been if it was tired, that 8% can make a huge difference. If you conversely spent the 24 hours prior to your exam just studying more and more and more and more, you may pick up a handful of extra questions on the exam that you otherwise would not have gotten because maybe you didn't review material yet, but your brain is going to be a bit more fatigued. It certainly won't be as fresh as if you had a nice 24-hour break period. And I think if you've done the amount of prep that I'm recommending going into it, doing one more full day of studying isn't going to benefit you all that much more than being rested and a bit sharper. So take it easy on yourself. The morning of your exam, maybe review a handful of terms and formulas if you want to, a couple other practice questions, just as a way to wake up your mind. But it's certainly not a period of time in which you want to try to be learning new material. You really just want to be relaxing and resting and getting yourself mentally prepared. On exam day, you should arrive early. You should triple check that you have all the things needed for your test center, like maybe your driver's license, your exam slip, pencils or calculators, whatever they allow you to bring on the day of, and certainly review what they allow you to bring on the day of before you leave your house that morning. The other thing I would tell you to do is just try to stay calm. And obviously it's probably easier said than done, especially for some people who may be more nervous or you feel like you're not a good test taker. But if you've followed the study strategy as I've laid it out here, you are going to be so well prepared compared to like maybe even 90% of the other people taking the SIE or the Series 7. That level of preparedness should just bring you a certain amount of confidence, especially if you've gotten 80% once or twice in practice exams. Statistically, you're just very likely to pass. So if you have that competence can help provide the confidence that you may be looking for if you don't normally have confidence going into a test. And when you know you have the competence, and if that can help provide you with confidence, then that should kind of bring the nerves down. And really, it's not like you're going to be not nervous at all, because it can be a big deal, and sometimes you really need to pass these exams to get these licenses done. There's no need to be nervous when you're trying to do something that you're really good at, which is answer Series 7 test questions correctly, right? So use my words maybe to inform a little bit of how you mentally prepare the day before and the morning of your test. And then of course, best of luck. So that's it for this ultimate test prep guide for both the SIE and Series 7 exams. If you have any more specific questions for me, I will respond to most comments to any of my YouTube videos. And if there are topics I didn't hit on in this video, let me know. We could certainly do follow-ups to this in the future. But as always, thanks for watching.